Good morning. My name's Bond. James Bond.
George Lazenby was originally signed on to star in 7 Bond movies. Now imagine if that happened. He would have been the James Bond of the 70s and probably half of the 80s as well. But for various reasons that didn't happen. Lazenby had this agent that had advised him that since the 60s spy craze had passed away, James Bond was finished and would die out in the 70s. The hippie culture, long hair and peace and love consciousness was taking over. So bottom line was, Lazenby took the advice and ended up starring in only one James Bond movie. The future of the franchise was at stake. A new James Bond was needed. The novel the producers decided to adapt for their 7th James Bond film adventure was going to be Diamonds Are Forever, which would largely take place in America, and with the start of the new decade the producers felt James Bond needed to be Americanized a bit more. There was even an American actor by the name of John Gavin casted for the role of James Bond, but the studios above the producers felt Sean Connery was needed to return to the role of Bond to ensure success. And the producers did manage to get him back by paying him $1.25 million, making him the highest paid actor at the time. I mean, for 1970 standards, that was just insane. But before you think Connery must have only returned because he had dollar signs in his eyes, that was not the case. He actually donated it to a Scottish education charity. The producers felt Diamonds Are Forever should be as much of a blockbuster success as Goldfinger had been in 1964, so they got back the director of Goldfinger, Guy Hamilton, production designer Cat Adams returned, and Shirley Bassey would sing the title song again, as she did with Goldfinger. First drafts of the script even had Goldfinger's brother as the main villain starring in the story, but they scrapped that idea. So with all these elements set into place and probably most importantly the original and beloved James Bond returning, Diamonds Are Forever surely became another Bond movie that got a lot of praise, right? Well, allow me to talk you through the movie again. So, good old Connery returns in the gun barrel, and I gotta say I really like this lean version of the Bond theme they used here. The movie opens up with a pissed off, faceless Bond kicking ass in various countries all over the world, searching for his arch nemesis Blofeld. Oh, awesome, so it's like a sequel to the previous movie where Bond's wife got killed and now he wants revenge? I'll get back to you on that one in a second. After asking around where Blofeld is at, we get to see Connery's face again.
My name is Bond. James Bond.
Okay, first off, why is Connery's voice sped up? In the original trailer of Diamonds Are Forever, you can even hear the original footage.
My name is Bond. James Bond.
Second of all, my god, has Connery aged since he last played Bond? It seems like 20 years have passed since we first saw Connery introduced in Dr. No. Anyway, Bond takes this girl's top off and strangles her in typical Connery fashion, and eventually finds out where Blofeld is at. And Blofeld this time, by the way, is played by Charles Gray, who had previously already starred as the ally Henderson in You Only Live Twice and is completely miscast as Blofeld. I mean, for God's sakes, this guy is British, a very posh one.
Lower, not up.
Anyway, it turns out Blofeld is using some sort of plastic surgery technique to make clones of himself by putting people into these piles of shit, or at least something like that. Of course, Bond manages to sneak into his facility and drowns one of the guys which was already in the shit cloning process and runs into the real Blofeld. One of the guards is about to take away Bond's gun, but then it turns out Bond has put a mousetrap in his pocket. Yeah, believe me, we're just getting started. Of course, Bond manages to take out Blofeld by throwing him into some other gooey stuff.
Welcome to hell, Blofeld.
And we get into the opening titles, and Shirley Bassey once again gave us another classic, memorable Bond song.
Diamonds are forever.
So let's take a moment to recap here. This pre-title sequence already started out a bit tacky. Blofeld making clones, a mousetrap in Bond's pocket, taking off bikinis to interrogate women, which fair enough, I don't really have problems with. But what were Bond's motives for going after Blofeld like this? It's not really stated. The death of Bond's wife isn't even mentioned or remembered by anyone in this movie. Neither is Irma Bunt, who ultimately was responsible for killing Tracy. It's like the filmmakers pretend it didn't happen. With the movie starting out in Japan, it's almost like it's just a direct follow-up to You Only Live Twice, and it just ignores Majesties. But yeah, continuity in the early Bond movies should never be questioned too much. After the opening titles, we see Bond and M being lectured on diamonds by a certain Sir Donald, and diamonds are a main plot element throughout the movie, and Sir Donald asks Bond a question about his holiday.
You've been on holiday, I understand. Relaxing, I hope.
Oh, hardly relaxing, but most satisfying. Cheers.
Cheers.
And some fans think this is a fourth wall breaking joke of Connery's absence in the previous movie, but it could also simply be referring to Bond's actual holiday going after Blofeld in the pre-title sequence. Whether it is meant to be a fourth wall breaking joke or not, it's definitely not half as bad as Lazenby's "this never happened to the other fellow" line. But anyway, it's explained how 80% of the world's diamonds come from South Africa, and we actually get a little montage showing this too. It is suspected that a lot of these diamonds are being smuggled, and Bond is needed to uncover this diamond smuggling ring and follow the trail and see what it leads to. And he needs to do this by taking the identity of diamond smuggler Peter Franks. We also get introduced to the henchmen of this movie, the assassins Mr. Wind and Mr. Kidd.
I'm Mr. Wind. This is Mr. Kidd.
Oh, I see.
In one of the deleted scenes, Mr. Wind and Mr. Kidd brutally killed this guy by putting a scorpion in his mouth, but Guy Hamilton thought it was a bit too violent and didn't leave it in, so now the scorpion is just dropped on his back.
Ha!
And this guy definitely gets my vote for the most hilariously exaggerated death in the series.
Ha!
The pair kills another guy involved in the smuggling ring, and then they walk off, hand in hand, because Mr. Wind and Mr. Kidd are homosexual, something which was also implied in the novel, but to me the way they show it in the film makes it feel a bit out of place for a Bond movie, but admittedly it makes them two very memorable henchmen. So like I mentioned before, Bond will be taking the identity of diamond smuggler Peter Franks, and there's this nice little scene of the real Peter Franks wanting to leave England, but he's taken in at the customs, and it turns out Moneypenny took Franks' passport and literally gives his identity to Bond, who's now in Peter Franks' car. It's a great little moment, complete with the flirting that we are used to from Connery and Lois Maxwell. It turns out the diamond smuggling stretches to Amsterdam. Yes, this actually is the only Bond movie to date that features my own home country, and admittedly I find it pretty cool to see what it was like during the 70s. Not that much has changed since. Mr. Wind and Mr. Kidd are also here and are shown to have been killing more people involved in the smuggling ring. Meanwhile, Bond is set out to meet his contact, or rather Peter Franks' contact, the Bond girl of this film, Tiffany Case, played by Jill St. John, the first American Bond girl, and she's a blonde when Bond comes in but turns into a brunette when she returns.
Weren't you a blonde when I came in?
Could be.
I tend to notice little things like that, whether a girl is a blonde or a brunette.
And which do you prefer?
Oh, providing the collars and cuffs match.
A great line of Connery there that never fails to make me laugh. Also, I gotta say, Tiffany Case in her underwear, posing as a brunette and all, is really hot. But she turns out to be a redhead with a far less attractive haircut. Shame she didn't stick with the brunette thing, that suited her a lot better, but maybe it's just me though. So Tiffany Case is a diamond smuggler who makes a really interesting introduction here. The filmmakers wanted her to be a tough girl who could look after herself, a real modern girl of the 70s if you will, with some American attitude.
Keep leaning on that tutor, Charlie, and you're gonna get a shot in the mouth.
She doesn't immediately trust Bond to be Peter Franks, so she has his fingerprints scanned on his glass, which do actually match with the real Peter Franks' fingerprints. It turns out Q has made a nifty little fingerprints gadget to make this happen, but Q also informs Bond that the real Peter Franks has escaped and went to Amsterdam. So the real Peter Franks arrives outside of Tiffany's apartment in Amsterdam, and Bond meanwhile is inconspicuously making out with himself in the corner, which really shows you how far we moved away from the serious spy thrillers the franchise started out with. But yeah, believe me, we're just getting started. So Bond walks up to the real Peter Franks.
Guten Abend.
Good evening.
Bitte?
And I have no clue why Bond is speaking German here. I mean, all of you do know that that has nothing to do with the Dutch language, right? Why would Bond speak German in Amsterdam? Anyway, Bond and Franks end up in a fight in the elevator, a good one by the way, one of the most exciting scenes in the movie actually. There is some genuine suspense before Bond manages to take him out, and then he quickly puts his Playboy membership cards in Franks' pocket so to make it seem that he was James Bond.
My God. You just killed James Bond.
Is that who it was?
And I never got this. Why do they make it seem like James Bond is a well-known name? I know it's a well-known name for us here in the real world, but in the world of the film itself, shouldn't he be, I don't know, a secret agent that nobody knows? I know this gag was meant for laughs, but come on. So Tiffany is holding on to the diamonds that Bond needs to smuggle with her to America. So how does he do that? By shoving the diamonds in Peter Franks' corpse in a coffin. Yeah, you know where he put them. Gross. So at the airport in America, Bond meets up with Felix Leiter, who is this time played by Norman Burton and is one of the weakest, most forgettable Leiters. So some gangsters involved in the diamond smuggling pick up Bond and take him to a funeral home.
The stiff. Deceased back there. Your brother, Mr. Franks?
Yes, 'twas.
I got a brother.
Small world.
I do have to admit, as corny as the jokes in this movie are, some of them are at least pretty funny. So the body of Peter Franks gets cremated and Bond receives the urn, which of course secretly holds the diamonds. And Bond is supposed to drop these diamonds off for the next smuggler in the ring, which is Shady Tree, but Mr. Wind and Mr. Kidd are also here and they take out Bond. And despite the movie being so light-hearted so far, we all of a sudden get a very disturbingly dark scene of Bond being cremated alive. I mean, Christ, that's just horrifying. And I don't even want to begin to imagine what that would be like, but fortunately Shady Tree opens the coffin and tells Bond the diamonds were fake, so that means Bond had actually put fake diamonds in Franks' body at the airport and Felix is holding on to the real ones. While reading a book in his hotel, Bond finds out more about this Shady Tree, who turns out to be a stand-up comedian at the White House, which is an exotic hotel casino in Las Vegas owned by billionaire Willard White, who we get some small glimpses of, and he's depicted as being the main villain of the film. So Bond goes to this White House, sporting his nice white tuxedo, and sees Shady Tree performing some jokes there. Of course Mr. Wind and Mr. Kidd once again are also here, and they end up killing Shady Tree, not knowing that the diamonds he got were fake. And Bond probably thought, yeah, screw the mission for tonight, I'm going gambling. So he goes to the crap stables and runs into this chick.
Hi, I'm Plenty.
But of course you are.
Plenty O'Toole.
Named after your father, perhaps?
So Bond just decides to bang her for the night, so he takes her to his room, but the gangsters from the airport show up there and throw Plenty out of the window.
Stop that! I've got friends in this town!
Exceptionally fine shot.
I didn't know there was a pool down there.
Admittedly, that one always cracks me up. So the gangsters leave and it's revealed that Tiffany Case is now in Bond's room, so Bond just decides, what the heck, I'll just bang her instead. So after finishing up, it's here where I always feel things look so out of place. Remember the bed scene in From Russia with Love, how there was a certain flair and glamour to the whole thing? Now, I'm not saying glamour always needs to be part of a Bond film, but here Connery just looks like a bored dirty old man with an ashtray on his chest. Anyway, Tiffany is clearly still after the real diamonds, which Felix Leiter holds at the moment, and she tries to talk Bond into running off with the diamonds together, and Bond knows that she only wants the diamonds for herself, but he just plays along with it and tells her that she can pick up the real diamonds at the Circus Casino. And it's here at the Circus Casino where things get even more tacky. I mean, there's a show of a chick turning into a gorilla, and there's even a damn elephant using a slot machine. Yeah, but believe me, we're just getting started. So Tiffany is instructed by Bond to pick up the diamonds, which are now put into this stuffed animal, and meanwhile Bond and Felix oversee the whole thing. Of course, Tiffany runs off with the diamonds, and Felix and his fellow agents lose sight of her. So Bond just goes to Tiffany's house and waits until she shows up again, and it turns out Plenty O'Toole's body is dumped into Tiffany's swimming pool. Wait, what? Why is she in her pool? Why is she even killed? She was just some random chick that Bond had picked up at the casino and wanted to bang until the gangsters just threw her out. But it turns out that there is a deleted scene where Plenty went back to Bond's room only to find out he was already doing Tiffany instead. So she got pissed off and found Tiffany's address and she went to her house. But she was mistaken for Tiffany and ended up being the one that got killed instead of her. But since none of that stuff is kept in the movie, it becomes quite a plot hole here. But yeah, the point of the scene is that it does scare Tiffany quite a bit and she starts to become a bit more cooperative with Bond, although Bond does have to slap her around first in typical Connery fashion.
Now, who's your connection?
You sound like a cop to me.
Who's your connection?
Yeah, Tiffany Case, the strong, modern, female character of the 70s, but Connery doesn't give a shit about that. Information, woman! So Tiffany reveals she passed the diamonds on to the next smuggler who is supposed to pick them up at the airport. So Bond and Tiffany follow the next smuggler down to a gas station and Bond sneaks into the back of his van, which is quite funny because the guy in the car behind the van can clearly see Bond sneak into the back, but not a single fuck was given from him that day. So the van drives over to the final destination of the diamonds, a secret Area 51-like facility in the desert, and Bond poses as a lab worker and discovers that they're building some sort of satellite there, and a bit later his cover is blown, so he has to make his way out of there, and for no real reason there seems to be a film set of the moon landing in this facility too. Why the hell is that even there? Bond makes his escape in a moon buggy, which I guess is the reason why they even have a moon landing film set in this facility. They just wanted an excuse to have Bond drive a moon buggy in the film. I mean, why? It's so out of place. I know the movies were starting to get way more campy during this period, but come on. So yeah, the moon buggy chase. Not much to say about it. It's cartoony and the villains are all comically stupid and I'm always glad when it's over. So Bond meets up with Tiffany again and the pair flee back to Las Vegas where there's another action scene because Bond and Tiffany are now also being chased by the cops. Really dumb American stereotypical movie cops. And although this action scene is a lot better than the one in the moon buggy, but unfortunately this also holds one of the biggest mess-ups in the Bond franchise, and that is when Bond enters a narrow alley on two wheels on the right side of the car, but he comes out of the alley on the wheels of the left side. The second unit had totally messed this up and the filmmakers tried to fix it by having a shot of Bond and Tiffany flipping between wheels in between the two shots, which does slightly redeem it, but it's still quite a mistake. A little while later, Bond and Tiffany have the bridal suite booked up in the White House, and after once again having sex, there's a cool moment where Bond just dresses up and tells Tiffany he'll be right back, so he just steps outside of the window and just casually steps on top of the elevator, taking him up to the top of the building, and he climbs up there himself, which is a very James Bond moment. Very cool. So now it's finally revealed who this Willard White character is.
Good evening, Mr. Bond.
Blofeld.
Good evening, 007.
Yes, so Blofeld is alive after all, and he successfully made a clone of himself too. He has been posing as Willard White all this time by using a voice-altering machine, and the real Willard White is held somewhere else. Now, I really like the idea of the main villain turning out to be Blofeld after all this, but I just don't like Charles Gray as Blofeld, and I don't like the idea of having a Blofeld clone, and Bond kills the clone anyway, so the whole idea doesn't really go anywhere. It just adds some more tacky stuff to the movie. So Bond is forced to go into an elevator and is gassed, and Mr. Wind and Mr. Kidd take Bond, and instead of just killing him the easy way, they put him inside a pipe at a construction yard. I mean, they could have just gassed him with a more lethal gas in the elevator, but yeah. And of course Bond eventually manages to escape this pipeline.
Thank you very much. I was just out walking my rat and I seem to have lost my way.
It's another pretty cheesy joke, but Connery does deliver it well. So Q is also out there in the field all of a sudden, and he gives Bond this voice-altering machine that is similar to that one of Blofeld, and he makes him sound like Blofeld's assistant, and with that they can find out where the real Willard White is located. So Bond goes over to that place, and we get a scene where Bond fights two gymnastic chicks by the names of Bambi and Thumper. And one of them kicks Bond in his balls. Yeah, you remember when this was a serious spy thriller franchise? So Bond and the two gymnastic chicks end up in a pool, and Bond gets to drown them a little bit in the water, and this definitely is one of the scenes where Connery does seem to thoroughly enjoy himself. So Bond and Felix rescue the real Willard White, and now they have him on their side. And meanwhile, Tiffany is hanging out with Q in the casino, and for no real reason she gets herself kidnapped. I mean, she sees a woman with a cat walking around, and apparently she thinks, hey, maybe I need to follow that inconspicuous woman. I don't know why, but it turns out that she walked into a trap, and it's actually Blofeld dressed up as a woman. Okay, first of all, what? And second of all, the fuck? Remember how Blofeld was first introduced in From Russia with Love, being faceless, menacing, and just a classic villain? How on earth did this franchise go from that to this? I mean, what the hell were they thinking? Blofeld in drag. When you see that, don't you just want to go like, ha! Ha! Anyway, it turns out that Blofeld has now launched that satellite into space, the one that Bond saw in the desert facility, and it has the diamonds on them. So, throughout the majority of the movie, we have been following diamonds around from South Africa to Holland into America through various characters to make it end up on Blofeld's satellite to do what exactly? Do the diamonds make the laser that the satellite fires more powerful, or does Blofeld just want to make sure his satellite looks nice and shiny? Either way, Blofeld is once again ransoming the world with this weapon, and we get some really bad scenes of the laser being fired on various locations on Earth, and it's so fake. I mean, I saw better special effects in amateur videos on YouTube than what we get to see here. And I know this is a movie from 1971 and a large portion of the budget went to Connery, but come on, in From Russia with Love, which was a way older movie than this, they had real explosions and real people being on fire, but these are just lazy effects of people being on fire. It's just so fake and distracting and laughable, even for 1970 standards. So back in the top floor of the White House, Bond and Willard White are wondering where Blofeld could be at, and they find out that Blofeld has this model built of an oil rig in Baja. Why would Blofeld even have this model placed here? This is Willard White's penthouse. Does he want Bond and White to find out where he is at? It makes no sense whatsoever. But yes, Blofeld is on an oil rig, and there he can control his laser satellite with some coding on a cassette tape. And Bond parachutes in on the oil rig and immediately gets taken to Blofeld, and Tiffany is also there, just mainly looking hot in a bikini, and Bond tries to switch the cassette tape with another cassette tape, but Tiffany is so stupid by the end of this movie that she puts the real tape back in.
Did it. I switched the tape in the machine.
You stupid twit, you put the real one back in.
Come on.
So the whole idea with the cassette tape doesn't really go anywhere, but Bond puts this weather balloon up, which works as a signal to bring in Felix Leiter, Willard White and some agents in helicopter that attack the oil rig, and this is just the most disappointing climax since Dr. No. Nothing really interesting is going on, and Tiffany gets a chance to redeem herself and show us the tough girl as her character was intended to be. I mean, do I even need to comment on that one? Just why? And to make this climax even more disappointing, there isn't even a big payoff between Blofeld and Bond. The filmmakers originally intended the movie to have this major climax scene of Bond and Blofeld fighting it out in a salt mine and Blofeld meeting his doom in a salt granulator. But that didn't happen, and instead we get Blofeld trying to escape in a mini-sub and Bond using a crane to crash the mini-sub into the control room. That's it. And then the movie all of a sudden just cuts to Bond and Tiffany going on a cruise ship together, and we've almost forgotten about Mr. Wind and Mr. Kidd, who are of course also on this ship, and they try to kill Bond with a bomb hidden in a cake. But Mr. Kidd is set on fire. Wait, so now all of a sudden the filmmakers are making an effort to set people on fire? Why didn't they just do that before? But yes, and Bond also shoves the Bond up Mr. Wind's ass, which I guess is meant to be even more funny because of the whole homosexual thing.
Well, he's certainly left with his tails between his legs.
But again, just so much tacky stuff in this movie.
How the hell do we get those diamonds down again?
Diamonds are forever.
And on that note, the 7th Bond movie comes to an end. Diamonds Are Forever is just one of the weakest, if not the weakest Bond movie in the series. It's just such a shame though, because this had all the ingredients and potential to be an epic follow-up to On Her Majesty's Secret Service. It could have been the ultimate revenge movie of Bond going after Blofeld, trying to avenge the killing of his wife, while still having diamonds as a subplot, but Bond's wife isn't even mentioned, and we get Blofeld in drag, all kinds of B-movie special effects, a shitload of tacky stuff like the mousetrap, elephants with slot machines, Blofeld clones, Bond making out with himself, a moon buggy and all kinds of other crap. It's just so disappointing. Charles Gray is the worst Blofeld to date, and Tiffany Case started out as a very interesting character when she's first introduced, but we all know where that one went. Even the return of Sean Connery, my personal favorite James Bond, cannot lift this movie up for me. And sure, there was some genuinely funny moments in it too. I liked seeing Amsterdam, and I liked the fight in the elevator, that was good too. But as a whole, it just falls flat and it becomes one of the most disappointing Bond movies that I rank at the absolute bottom. Oh well, at least Plenty O'Toole brought 2 major upsides to the movie.